Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Dynamics Corner, the podcast where we dive deep into all things Microsoft Dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned expert or just starting your journey into the world of Dynamics 365, this is your place to get insights, learn new tricks, and hear from industry experts. I'm your host, Chris.
And this is Brad. This episode was recorded on June 14th, 2023. Chris. In the world of Business Central and e-commerce, there's a lot of choices and there's a lot of things to consider when choosing an e-commerce platform. A lot more than many may think. With us today, we were joined by Jordan Carpenter of Ecommerce.
Mr. Jordan.
Hello.
Glad it's working.
Yes, after some technical difficulty, we are here. And I can hear you. It's great.
Yeah.
Look at that.
You get the audience clapping for you.
We won't let anybody know what we just had to go through and experience watching you try to figure out how to use your speakers.
Yeah, that's why we have a solid product team over here, Brad.
It was good though. It gave me entertainment for a good 15 minutes now, but I appreciate it.
It was just a little warm up. It was perfect.
No, it was good. It was perfect. Mr. Jordan, thank you, sir, for taking the time to speak with us. It's always a pleasure. I always enjoy talking with you, and this time we get to speak with you on the podcast.
Yes, of course. Thank you all for having me.
It's always my pleasure. And today, if you listen, everybody hears me. I always say there's two things I should record. Like, it's fascinating, and we have great guests. I think we should just have a recording, and I don't have to say that.
You just drop it in every time.
I should put it on the soundboard, and then I'll put that in there. But today you're going to talk with us about e-commerce. E-commerce is popular in the world. It became more popular, evidently, over the past few years. It was big before then, but the last few years, I think there was a big boom in e-commerce software, e-commerce solutions because of the remoteness of the world.
COVID issues.
Yes. I don't know how to phrase that. Like, people call it like COVID time. I just say during the period over the last few years.
Isn't that the current status now in the timeline now? It's either post-COVID or pre-COVID. That's how you differentiate timelines now.
I always, I'm obviously remote, guys, y'all know that. But for those listening, I've worked remote for a long time, and I always reference it when I'm telling people a story. I'm always like, it's pre-COVID. I also did that pre-COVID. Yeah, it's like a different world. It was a different time.
Yes. And then, yes, it is. Okay. So I guess at the point in history is pre-COVID. So then when you age yourself or date yourself, I was born pre-COVID. I was born post-COVID.
I think that's going to be the thing.
So,
my son born middle of COVID.
I think there were a lot of sons and daughters born middle of COVID.
I think so.
Because I think COVID lasted quite a bit. I think, what was it, 3 years, 2.5 years? I don't know.
It was a while.
I spent a lot of time going between Florida and here. So I didn't experience a lot of the shutdown that most people did. So we still had we didn't have as strict rules. So thankfully, I didn't have a lot of the restrictions like some of the other states or the counties in the country. But I know some areas were pretty tight, so I could see where a lot of there was a lot of newborns coming about mid-COVID or just shortly after COVID.
I was lucky. I was splitting time between here being North Carolina and Arizona, and neither of which really locked down all that much. So
you also had the benefit of what they called it, I don't know, freedom or whatever. Yeah. So it was nice. It was the best time to fly. If people used to say to me, "Why are you flying? Do you not feel safe?" I said, "If there's a safer time to fly, it's not. If there isn't a safer time to fly than now, because they were cleaning everything, they were doing everything, and sometimes there were 10 people on the flight, and they spread you out so far, you had like 3 rows between you and the next person."
Well, and it was great for me because I had flown so much pre-COVID, right? That I had a little bit of status with American. And so every time I flew back to Raleigh, they're like, oh, nobody's sitting in first class, free upgrade. And I was like, okay, twist my arm. Like,
Yes.
sure.
The thing that
Just
did,
the whole plane sitting in the front of the plane because there's 10 people on it. So yeah.
it was disappointing because you're going to get drinks on the plane. But I remember going into Logan Airport, and at that point, Logan Airport, they were doing like one flight at a time.
Yeah.
So I would go into Logan Airport with no traffic, which is unheard of. And there was just the people that were on your plane going through it. Like, it's just like one of the busiest airports. You're walking through and it's like a ghost town. It was eerie. It was like you were delayed in coming in, at the off hour of the night, because they do stagger the terminal closings overnight. And if you're coming in late, you can get stuck in a quiet one. It was just surreal. But enough of that, to go back to it. But with e-commerce, e-commerce is a big part of business today. There are a number of e-commerce solutions available for Business Central. There is, there are many options to choose from. And I'm hoping that you could talk with us to help us understand what somebody or what a business should consider when choosing an e-commerce solution.
I can absolutely speak about that.
Oh, good.
So to hit on one thing, and you alluded to this a little bit, there's a huge shift during COVID, right? I think you had a lot of businesses, and I'm going to say, I don't want to say this, and then I'm going to immediately say it, but they were lagging a little bit, right? They were like, hey, we're going to stick to our old ways. We don't necessarily want to sell online. That can wait. We don't need to deal with it. Well, when the world shuts down and you can't have people into your place of business, or you can't have that face-to-face interaction, you can't necessarily have sales reps out meeting with folks and following up on sales, you've got to have a way, whether it be a customer portal or whether it be full-on e-commerce, you've got to have a way to deliver to your customers. So we saw a huge uptick. So I wasn't at Sana. I was at another ISV prior, or I guess during COVID, and then came over to Sana actually a year and a week ago today.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I need this for me just to like hit in my office when I'm having a good day or a bad day. But no, Sana had its best year ever, oddly enough, during COVID. I know a lot of companies struggled, but we had one of the strongest years we'd ever had because there was such a high demand for e-commerce. The ISV I was with prior to Sana, Avalara, I'm sure a lot of the listeners are familiar with them. Same thing, did a lot within the e-commerce space. So they also saw this huge uptick during that time because people didn't have a choice really but to sell online. So.
It's good to speak with you because that's one of the focus. We know you work with Sana now. Sana has an e-commerce solution, which we can talk about their e-commerce solution. But you have experience working with businesses that need to have an e-commerce solution.
Correct.
And
absolutely.
There are a number of options available out on the market. All of the options have different features, different functionality. E-commerce, there's a lot of terms, there's a lot of things in business that individuals use and they think it's just generic. It's almost like somebody saying, oh, I work in IT. Well, exactly. There's such a broad market that you need to determine what tool you need to do the job. So when it comes to e-commerce, do you have things or points that someone should consider when choosing an e-commerce solution?
Yep, 100%. And you've got to look, not all, as you said, not all platforms are the same. They're not built for the same purpose, right? So I think it's important to evaluate what your business is doing, right? So quick background, when I was with Avalara, I worked very closely with Shopify, with BigCommerce, with Magento or Adobe Commerce Cloud, with Salesforce Commerce Cloud. So I've worked with a number of these different platforms. Obviously, I've worked with Sana as well, both at Avalara and obviously the last
I hope you work with Sana. You've been there for a year.
So
by this time, you should be
very
using
closely with Sana now. And I think it's important, right? One of the big things and key differentiators about Sana is we were built for B2B merchants, right? So quick history lesson, right? Because I find it interesting. Before Sana became Sana, we were a We're actually a Magento agency out of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And they found this little niche where they're like, hey, we're doing all of these builds, these Magento builds. And they were catering to manufacturers and distributors. And there were a couple of gaps when it came, or number of gaps, when it came to the Magento platform. So they started doing little enhancements and adjustments. And eventually they're like, hey, why wouldn't we just spin this off and make it our own product? So they decided to create a new platform that then grew into Sana. So I say all this because, Sana's 15 years old, but we've been involved in this space much longer than that. And we were built specifically for the B2B merchant. So not trying to hit you with a sales pitch, but I think that it's important for folks to realize that and know that I'm not saying we're the only B2B focused e-commerce platform out there. There's others out there, right? But I think it's important when you're evaluating to look at that niche, right? You look at, certain platforms that really cater to the D2C market, right? And they're dipping their toe into B2B, right? Like you look at a Shopify, and love those folks, worked with them for years. And a lot of the huge D2C brands are using them. I always throw out Skims, Kim Kardashian's brand, massive brand, uses Shopify. Probably anything that advertises to you on Instagram uses Shopify. But I know we see, obviously at Sana, we're working a lot with manufacturers and distributors, but also see in the Microsoft space, right? There's a huge focus on that. So again, it's important to evaluate that and look at that piece and know, hey, what product was built for me? What are the features that I need to help my business grow and streamline certain processes? Because it's not all.
To go back, you had mentioned a couple of things as far as what somebody should go through in talking about the options that Sana provides. A couple of things come to mind. You mentioned B2B, D2C.
Yep.
One, what is B2B and D2C? And two, that is or should be a consideration when looking for a product, because if you
100%.
are a B2B merchant or a supplier or a D2C supplier, you may or may not have different requirements within an application. And then can I keep loading the questions on to see if you can remember them all?
Load away.
Okay. So we talked about B2B, D2C. What are those? So if somebody's not certain, I hear these terms. I find that I hear a lot of terms that are thrown out that some people do not necessarily understand what they're saying. They just assume this blanket or have a thought of it, but maybe really not define what that may be. Then you're talking about Shopify and some of the other WooCommerce and other points that you're talking about, which to me are third-party hosted solutions. So is there a consideration for choosing a hosted solution by a third party or having a solution hosted on prem? Or is there a consideration for a hybrid or having a product that can do both? Lots of questions for you.
A lot of questions. So I jotted these down, and hopefully I cover them all, but stop me if I miss one. So let's take it back to the B2B versus D2C. So B2B, business to business, think wholesale. Another super interesting one that I had never really thought was B2B. And then as I came to Sana, just because we do a lot within this space, I'm like, oh, that is B2B. Think like corporate entities selling to their franchise owners, right? So this happens a lot, like, companies like Orange Theory or really anybody that has a franchise model, right? They don't own that location down the road. So you're technically having one business sell to another business. Throw that out there because I always find it interesting.
I did not think of that as well. I thought the franchisees used the software possibly for the franchisor, but I did not think of it being a service that's sold to them in that angle. Interesting.
Yeah. So that's a fairly big one for us too. And then D2C, which is interesting because it used to be, what was it? I can't remember what it was
B2C?
called.
B2C?
B2C, yes, thank you.
I don't know when it changed, but I did notice like
magically changed during COVID, maybe not pre-COVID, but post-COVID. So it used to be B2C.
That would be an interesting fact. Chris, look it up.
Yeah. When did it change? And then D2C is just direct to consumer. So think any large, I shouldn't say any large retail brand, because there's definitely a retail vertical that is B2B, but think about like this pullover, right? I bought from a direct to consumer brand on their website that oddly enough is hosted by Magento, or it's on a Magento website because I worked with them at Avalara. And then I had Sana.
Quick note, the difference. I did look it up, Brad.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So there's a difference. D2C is a product that reaches a consumer directly via digital channels without a middle distribution channel. A B2C is similar, but the difference is not a direct route from the producer. There's a middleman, which is retailers or wholesalers, becomes part of that equation. So that's the difference between the two.
That's confusing because
it's super confusing. That's probably
super
why they
confusing.
just say D2C now.
Because if somebody comes to my website and they order from me, I'll either ship it from my facility or ship it from a third-party logistics. Or
so
through
D2C
a third-party
is
logistics.
basically, if I'm producing the product, I can directly sell it to a consumer. The B2C comes into play if I sell it to a wholesaler. The wholesaler would be considered as a B2C because they would be the one who's selling it to the customer, not necessarily it's their product. They're just a wholesaler at that point. That's the difference in terms.
I understand, I think, because if I were to purchase something from a box store, I don't even understand, because if I order something from a box store, I'm going to their website and they're sending it to me.
But I guess
but it's not their product.
Into like Bed Bath & Beyond and buy, which actually is a good e-commerce example here in a second, and buy a KitchenAid mixer, I guess KitchenAid would be the B2C, right? Because they're selling it through the channel that is Bed Bath & Beyond. And then
you're buying it from Bed Bath & Beyond in this case.
Correct.
So Bed Bath & Beyond would be D2C.
So if KitchenAid is the one selling it directly to the consumer, that would be considered direct D2C. Yeah.
But
it's I know.
You learn something every day.
Oh, if you manufacture the product, it's D2C.
Yes.
If you purchase it for resale, it's B2C.
Yes.
That's a better way to explain it.
Yep.
Got it.
That makes sense. Yep.
And then B2B is I'm a business selling it to another business. So if I manufacture the product and I sell it to Bed Bath & Beyond in this scenario, because they're a store, that would be B2B.
As B2B, yeah.
Business to business.
Yep.
So now we spent 20 minutes of this podcast defining. I shouldn't even have asked the question. I should have just gone with everybody just assumes end consumer, D2C, business, B2B.
I do have to throw my little plug in about Bed Bath & Beyond, because if you do any research into kind of obviously what has been going on with them and the fact that they're closing all their stores and declaring bankruptcy, one of the key things, I think it was their interim CFO that came in, and I think it was a she, but she mentioned that one of the biggest faults they had was the delay to sell online and their delay to enter e-commerce. So it was super interesting reading through that it was, I remember growing up and every Saturday it was like, hey, we're going to feel like I'm on old school, but we're going to go to Bed Bath & Beyond. We're going to do that after brunch. And
I think it's a great store, but I don't know if I was younger, I wanted to go there on a Saturday.
Because they had
another one of the archaic.
This is when I didn't have a choice, Brad. This is like I didn't have a way to go do my own thing. I was getting drugged.
Okay, I understood.
That is important, though. Just a lot of business got left behind because they didn't make it convenient for customers to buy from them. Not everyone wants to go to the store anymore. I sure don't. I research. And if I can buy it online for the same price, I'll just buy it online.
I prefer to buy things online. If I don't have to leave through that front door, I'm happy. If I have to go to the store, there are some things that I will go out for. I do not get food delivered. So if I want something, I will go pick it up. And I don't often get to go. I would eat it. It's one of those weird things. But everything else, if I have to go to a store, I dislike it.
No, I'm with you on that. It's kind of nice. You're getting out of the house.
Yes. So we talked about B2B, B2C. So the features, one thing to consider is the type of customer. I think we got that solved now as far as what the options are. Which type of customer you have in the features with the software, because they're two different feature sets. One is you're selling to a business, which you may have terms, you may have purchase orders, you may have blanket orders, a number of
100%.
things. And
the story I always, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Story I always tell is I was working with, this is a couple weeks into Sana, and we're working with a company that sold, they basically sold all the accessories to storage good facilities. And they're like, and this is something that Sana does, but they're like, we need to have them to only have access to a certain product catalog. And I'm like, that's kind of interesting. Good example, especially when I was early on at Sana, but I was trying to think of the use case here. Well, one of their clients was public storage. You guys know public storage. They have a unique orange, right, that they use. So all the doors are orange, all the signage is orange, right? So they needed to know somebody couldn't go in there and just pick an orange paint. They needed to go in and make sure that it was that specific paint that they were eligible to buy. A lot of those storage facilities were also franchise owned as well, not to take it back to what we were saying earlier. But so that's something that's important to look at and make sure your platform has that functionality. So
I have a question for you, Jordan, on this e-commerce space. There's a lot of changes, the convenience of e-commerce. There's a lot of different e-commerce tools out there. AI is coming into play as well. What do you think that is going to look like? 'Cause to me, in my opinion, e-commerce always felt the same, right? It's just a digital front for me to buy something rather than me going to a physical store. Like, what do you see in the next 5 to 10 years? Like, how does that look like in e-commerce? Because there's so many out there now.
Yeah. So I think, from an overarching theme in e-commerce, I think we're going to have, and I'm going to say this, and then also my little plug that Sana's actually working on this. But someone like Brad, that's like, I don't want to go into a store, right? But maybe you want to go into a virtual store, right? As we push that, maybe I want to go pick up an item, right? I'll say in quotes, pick up an item. I think that you're going to see, maybe not in 2 years, but maybe in 5, 6 years, 7 years, I think you're going to see a lot more of that, where you're going to have this like augmented reality. Right?
Excellent.
Where you go and look at it. You've already got things now. We were looking at flooring, right? And
I could put in my glasses and walk and take something off a shelf.
Get those new Apple glasses that are a fortune. But I think that's going to be it. And then you've also got, it's Home Depot or Lowe's or maybe both now, but you can like hold your camera up with augmented reality. You're going to see what that flooring looks like or what those cabinets look like. A lot of furniture retailers are doing this.
IKEA did that. Like, they have an app where you can just like place what does the couch look like right here.
Yeah.
And
I think you're going to see a big adoption of that, because especially for stuff like that, for furniture, for artwork, TV, anything like that. It's like, what does this look like? Sherwin-Williams does it. I feel like I'm giving some plugs to some brands here. I should get a little ad credit. Sherwin-Williams does it with paint, right? They've got full on augmented reality where you can hold it up and see what it's going to look like against your wall.
I think with the AI, and then we'll go back to the solutions and what some should consider when choosing a solution such as Sana. I think the use of AI for those like myself, or if you want to go into the store, could help guide you with similar products. If you look at some of the solutions now, other people have purchased things that you don't even know about. Other things, other consumers have purchased this. I think, Chris, to your point with using AI, I think getting better modeling of how to determine what to present in this virtual store for somebody to use. Jordan's point of having a store that you can browse of products picked for you so you can see them so they don't look like ads, but almost as if you're going through a store would be a great experience.
And I know I went the AR route, not the AI route, but I'll say to you, like, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, but as a consumer, like, I like when something is advertised to me. If I bought a certain shirt and they're like, hey, you're going to like this too, advertise away. Like,
I agree with you.
Best case, I buy the shirt. Worst case, I don't. Like, I'm not like mad that they advertised it to me.
That stuff works because there's a couple things I was like, damn, I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I found it useful. So in that sense, if it's along lines with what I purchased from the store I'm in,
Yeah.
not that if I'm, talking about Doritos out in public and then I go onto my computer and I start getting Doritos ads.
Yeah.
I'm talking if I'm going through and shopping and I get, oh, you may like this.
Yeah.
I've purchased so many products that way because they were useful
Yeah.
and I didn't even think of that tool.
Even
So
peripherals.
that is something
right?
that could be a consideration, is the feature and functionality of the platform to support customer assisted purchasing to enhance the customer journey through the shopping experience.
And for the business, that's all upsell, right?
Yes.
So
What they call
that's
it, basket in retail.
It is
The
called that,
basket.
yeah.
And we can use the retail terms. That's good.
Basket. You don't want abandoned carts. That's another thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Abandoned carts.
Abandoned
How do you get
carts.
them unabandoned if they're abandoned?
You got to get them back. You can use email
It's that
marketing.
retention is important. Like
Especially
something
if
to
you have
consider in your
plugins
e-commerce.
that help you with email marketing after the fact, which Sana has.
So you can help market. I have gone to some e-commerce sites, put in my cart, and then abandoned my cart because either I changed my mind and I didn't clear my cart, or I just stopped because I'm like, I'll buy it later. And I did receive emails. Oh, your X and X is still available. Act now.
Are you sure you don't want to purchase this? Right? And you're like,
Yeah,
maybe I do. Maybe I do.
So we talked about the B2B, B2C, D2C option. We talked about the ability to enhance the customer journey by related or suggested products. You talked about having some additional plugins to facilitate the journey, and you mentioned Sana has some of those, and we can talk about those. I am interested in learning more about the Sana product and Sana offering for some of these.
Yeah. The other thing before we go forward, I want to jump into, I think another important thing to consideration is how you're going to implement the platform, right? So some of these traditional platforms, you're going to need to work with a digital agency, right? So you're working with an extra entity to help implement that platform. Rarely are you going to do it yourself unless you're going with a kind of a more entry level platform, but usually you're going to have someone implement that for you, maintain that for you. Brad, I know we're going to talk about plugins here in a little bit, but hitting on that, if you're going to add plugins, you probably need an agency to help you. That's how a lot of those traditional platforms work. Sana and a couple of others are unique in that we actually implement the platform ourselves. So where a lot of these traditional platforms work with the digital agencies, Sana's taken a different route where we work with value-added resellers and the Microsoft partners in the space and implement that way. Sana does the implementation. And the reason we do that is we actually are fully integrated into the ERP. So a lot of your traditional platforms are standalone. Something that makes Sana unique is that we're fully integrated, right? So we're making your ERP that single source of truth.
So with that, what I hear is when you have a platform, take a look at if there's an integration within your ERP software.
100%.
Because if it's not integrated within your ERP application, you may have to come up with another process to get the order information in and the shipment information out. Whereas if it's an integrated product, you will get that real time, near real time, or I can use the word, when I use the word real time, near real time, I understand some of these processes, there's delays and there's jobs and there's reasons for it. Sometimes real time is not an advantage. I've worked with implementations of all sorts of integrations, and sometimes the near real time is better or more stable. You mentioned the integration with Sana with ERP applications. Yep. Speaking of Sana, which ERP applications do you work with? We're talking Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central in the case of our conversation, but are there other applications that it integrates with?
We do. So it's pretty much everything within the Microsoft suite except SL. So AX, NAV, F&O, BC, GP, the list goes on. We also integrate into SAP. So those are the two main platforms. Do a lot more with SAP overseas. So as I'd mentioned, we got our start in the Netherlands. expanded into the US about 7 years ago. So do a lot more on the Microsoft side of the house in the US from a percentage of business perspective, but it's those two platforms.
And you had mentioned AX, FNFCM, NAV, BC. Which version of NAV or Business Central do you support back to? Obviously, you support Business Central of the latest release. Do you know how far back you support for NAV? And for Business Central, do you support both online and on-prem?
We do. So that question, I know the answer to. Yes. On-prem and cloud version. How far back we go with NAV, I don't know off the top of my head. But I can find out and we can throw it in the description section.
We'll throw it in the show notes just for the sake of the discussion.
Perfect.
And I'm just asking, NAV products have reached their end of life. I mean, there may be some left over, so it is understandable for application providers to not support those old versions because it is difficult to keep up. So it was just, you mentioned it, so I was just curious what the support level is for that. During the conversation, we talked about, you mentioned that Sana will implement the e-commerce solution with a partner or a value-added reseller, whereas some of the other platforms may require you to use a digital agency. What is a digital agency? I go for the definitions because I want to make sure I'm clear. Right? This is like, to me, we record these, but this is a conversation to educate Brad. That's why we did this. Chris was sick of answering my questions. He said, we got to get with everybody in the community and just let them
like an e-commerce test for me. So I like it. So think digital agency. So think anything, website related, right? And it's more than that. A lot of these companies were marketing agencies that then, traditional marketing agencies that then spun up a digital practice because of the world we live in, right? And the fact that it's going that way from a technology perspective, but they're the ones actually implementing the platform itself. So this happens mainly Shopify, BigCommerce, Adobe Commerce Cloud, or Magento, right? You're not going to implement those yourself. So you've got to think what a value-added reseller is for your ERP, that digital agency is for these e-commerce platforms.
So you purchased the application in essence, and then this company will help you implement that piece.
Correct.
Okay. And so
now, sometimes you're buying it from them directly as well, right? It depends.
Is that the same as content marketing with your e-commerce? Is that what you're referring to, Jordan, or is that entirely different?
That's different. It's different.
Gotcha.
Another option. So we talked about your customer base. We talked about the integration to your ERP application. Yep. Another one that we touched base on or mentioned was self-hosted versus cloud-hosted. So we talked with Sana. That's a type of example where you have a solution where you'll help with the implementation with the value-added reseller or the partner, whatever term you want to use. Now, when it comes to having an e-commerce solution, is it, why would someone go on-prem versus online? Is it more advantageous? Like, where does it sit?
Yeah. So
self-hosted, I guess we could call it.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring this up. So about 2 years ago, maybe a little under 2 years ago, Sana made this big push to go to the cloud, right? And be a SaaS solution, right? So some benefits there for us. We added a bunch of functionality into that quote unquote out of the box offering, right? So you're getting that, that we've got 3-tier, like many platforms. We've got different tiers that you can purchase that include features, functionalities, etc. So what you're getting there out of the box. We're pushing updates every 2 weeks, and you're not having to worry about maintenance, right? We're taking care of that for you. It's on a subscription model. You're not having to worry about any sort of going in, doing any sort of enhancements, anything like that. We're taking care of that for you.
So in the case of Sana, and maybe in you put a clear differentiation between self-hosted and hosted internally or on your own hardware versus having an online solution. The online solution is sort of, for lack of a term, set it and forget it. You worry about just the configuration. The provider will worry about the actual content and the usability of the software and keeping it updated and current and secure. So
yes, indeed.
that's where it goes also is what considerations are or should be made for security when having an e-commerce solution.
Are you asking me? Sorry, I missed that piece. Come on.
No, we have to have fun. We always have to have fun.
I know.
No, it's just when you talk about the SaaS version and the on-prem, hosted yourself, who's maintaining and managing the application. I start to think of security. Yep. Security with your e-commerce solution because it has a lot of information. So what considerations do you think someone should make as far as security around their e-commerce solution?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hugely important, right? Like you mentioned, there's a ton of customer data that comes through that leaves you open to vulnerabilities, for lack of a better phrase, right? That should be forefront in your mind. Any platform you're looking at, whether you're looking at Sana, which hopefully you are if you're listening to this podcast, or you're looking at a Shopify, BigCommerce, the list goes on, right? You want to make sure that those companies or those platforms have their ducks in a row, for lack of a better term there, right? They've got the certifications, they've got everything they need to be compliant from a security perspective.
So that's a definite consideration to ensure that 100%. The data is secure, and using an online solution, if you're going with a company, will manage that for you without you having to worry about keeping up with the latest security threats. Or I know e-commerce, there's a big, obviously you have more digital commerce, more customers to it. It's a lot easier to, have some, what do they call them? Bad actors. Why do they use the word bad actor? Bad actors to try to compromise.
Bad actors, yeah.
Bad actors.
So it's great. Now with so many things come with e-commerce. Now, e-commerce, somebody has to pay for this. I understand with B2B, not pay for. Are you okay over there?
Yeah, I just had something fall off my wall. It's all good. I have some sticky corkboard up there, and it just fell off. I was like, okay.
This is great. See, this is what I love about the way we do this podcast, because we just have conversations, and everyone I'm sure knows Jordan and I run into each other in a lot of places. So we just continue the fun, even though we record it. But not when someone has to pay for it in the sense of paying for the implementation, paying for the application. I'm talking if you're selling online. Yeah. There needs to be an exchange for payment. B2B typically will have purchase orders. You can have terms, and then you can do billing separately. The B2C, D2C, also B2B has it as well, where there may be some online payments.
Yep.
One, does Sana have online payment capability, and what would someone need to do to set that up? Does the payment gateway go through Sana? See, I'm kind of giving some of the answers, I think.
Yeah.
My question I have is,
Stop
some of
right
the function.
There. Let Jordan answer.
Okay. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. So I'll answer this a couple different ways. Yes. We've got a couple of options when it comes to payments. We've got what we call Sana Pay and Sana Pay Plus, which is us white labeling Adyen. So you can pay check, ACH, credit, pay on account, which I guess is the same thing, kind of. If you don't want to use that for any reason, we partner with a number of folks in the space, VersaPay, iSolutions, the list goes on. The nice thing about Sana too is if you're like, hey, I'm super loyal to the payment provider I'm working with, I want to work with them, we can work with you on that integration. So
okay, so Sana offers their own embedded payment solution, but if you have an existing relationship with a payment provider, if you're looking to transfer e-commerce, or if you're a retailer that has a payment provider or payment processor for your in-store credit card purchases, you could use that same provider with the Sana solution, but that's a consideration to who actually you use for your payment gateway or your payment processing with your e-commerce solution.
Exactly. So we've got, just hit on that. Yeah, we've got the embedded solution right? We've also got pre-built integrations to a number of the big players in the space and in this ecosystem. And then again, yeah, as you mentioned, if you've got a provider that you're loyal to and want it to work within Sana, we can make it happen.
Okay.
So that actually happened with an organization we recently started working with, ISV on the payment side, and we just had enough customers come to us, and they were like, it was customers and partners that were like, hey, we love this offering. We need an integration to work within Sana, or we need an integration with Sana. Let's make it happen. And partner, the other ISV, customer, and us all got together and we're able to work together on it. So it's pretty cool to see. Moved fairly quickly, cool. And now we have 10 to 12 folks that are already on it, and it's probably only been live for a couple months. So
oh wow, that's
cool to see the growth.
It's nice to see that grow, but it's also nice. I think you hit on a point there with the flexibility of the solution that you have, where you have the ability to have some things done to fit within your business model, which is nice. So here you didn't have just a list of payment processors. What is it? A payment processor, payment gateway? What's the proper term?
I call them PSPs. I don't remember what that stands for though.
Chris, GPT.
PSP? I don't know.
Yeah,
I always
service provider.
Probably.
Yeah. Yep. That's what it means.
Yeah, it's payment service provider. I always like payment processor, payment gateway. It just shows you how I date myself. So the ability to
we have a history lesson on updated terms on this podcast as well.
So. Yeah, I just have fun talking with you. So what other now Sana is an e-commerce solution. So what is Sana's target? What would you think would be the ideal customer for a Sana implementation? I mean, obviously not every solution fits every type of customer. It's very difficult to say this is for everybody. Is it geared towards smaller customers that have, few orders, larger customers that have a lot of orders, or is it sort of like that SMB market in the middle, or a range?
It's definitely that SMB market is our sweet spot, especially stateside. We've got a number of enterprise customers. We actually have a dedicated enterprise team as well. So some big name. I can mention this name because we did a shared study with them, but like Vera Bradley, prime example. And this is actually an interesting case. So Vera Bradley, that I would consider enterprise, uses us, right? We work with them. We work with them for their B2B site. They work with Shopify on their direct consumer side. So we see a lot of larger brands do that. And we kind of all work together in that front. But to come back to your question, sweet spot is SMB, B2B, manufacturing and distribution. We do a lot in the food services space, do a lot within one of my favorite verticals, wine, spirits, and beer. Also a big one for us. So
nice.
So you get to go on site a lot.
So I am getting to go to Napa for the first time for an event that I actually need to check with our marketing team about. They're like, do you want to do this? And I was like, that depends. Do I get to go to this? Yes. Then yes, we should absolutely do it.
So that's good. So that's an important piece it is a range. SMB is a range. Manufacturing is a range. Some businesses may fit in there, but it's important to understand that the application can support a business of your size, from a performance point of view, from a functionality point of view, and it has features and functionality that suits the way you do processing. So.
And then the other cool thing that we offer that I feel like a lot of times gets missed, and I might have mentioned it earlier in this, but we also have the ability for someone just to spin up a really what I would consider kind of watered down e-commerce or a light version, right? And just do a customer portal. So we see a lot of folks that are like, hey, we don't want to go full on e-commerce. We just want to do that. And we see some of our smaller brands as well that are like, hey, we want to grow this arm of the business. So let's test the waters with the customer portal first.
So the customer portal would be more for the B2B market.
100%.
And is something that a person looking for a solution should consider. What are the features that someone may consider within a customer portal for their customers?
Yeah, you're looking at ease of payment, right? That's one thing. Looking at order history, catalog selection within that, anything there. I mean, it's essentially just a light version of e-commerce.
Okay. And with B2B, in with Sana, I've come across this question often when it comes to e-commerce. Customer specific pricing, volume pricing by customer.
100%.
And
that is something we do. So, yep. And that kind of goes along with that product catalog as well, right? It's something that's important for folks to look at. If you're playing in that space, those are probably two things that you want to offer your customer base.
The by product catalog, you mean customer specific product catalog.
Correct.
That's either tailored or priced for that customer.
Exactly.
Not everybody pays the same price.
Correct.
There's no secret there. I'm not letting any cats out of the bag.
Yeah.
There's volume pricing and there's volume pricing. And a lot of times pricing is set by volume. I don't know. Did I say volume enough times, Chris?
How many times?
That's quite a few.
The volume didn't work earlier on this podcast.
No, that was
well,
for some of us.
Yeah. 2 out of the 3 of us.
No, it was great. Well, Mr. Jordan, sir, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to having me. Always. I would like to have you on again to have a more in-depth conversation about e-commerce from a different angle. And I think we can do that in a different episode within the next few months. But I do appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. In the meantime, how can someone get a hold of you to learn more about Sana and the other great things that Sana is doing within the e-commerce space?
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys can always email me at j.carpenter, spelled like a woodworker, at sana-commerce.com.
j.carpenter.
Or if you come onto our website, my buddy Tarek's little face will pop up in the corner for you, and you can start chatting with him, and he will connect you with the right folks as well. So,
is he really a person?
He is really a person.
So if he pops up, he'll answer me?
That is him.
Excellent.
It was interesting when I was doing research on Sana before I decided to move over. I was like, yeah, this guy's not real. And then I met him my first day on the job. I was like, hey, you're the website guy. So, yeah.
So he's working 24/7.
He's all the time. The chat goes down, I think, at 6, or they push it to someone in Europe.
Okay, so there's different people.
Whatever the time difference would be. Somebody's on there. Somebody will help you.
But check out sana-commerce.com to learn more about Sana Commerce and the e-commerce offering. And thank you again, Jordan. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and I will be seeing you soon. I do have to catch up with you on some upcoming events to see if we're going to be there together.
Perfect. Sounds good. We'll talk soon.
All right. Ciao. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Chris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.